Hey guys, what's going on? This is Andrew here today, and we're going to be continuing the series that I like to call My History with Gaming. In this video, we're going to be looking back at my history with PC gaming. As long as I can remember, I've always loved being on a computer, whether it was a laptop, desktop, or anything computer related. My dad is an electrical engineer that knows his way around all kinds of computers, and he was always enthusiastic whenever I was interested in them as well. I'd have to say that he was the entire reason that I have my hobbies as I do now. My earliest memories of being on a PC have to be on one of my family's old e-machines back in the early 2000s, and I spent a majority of my time simply just typing random shit into Microsoft Word. Other than that, since I was a Nickelodeon and Noggin kid, we're going that far back to that old channel called Noggin, I always went on the websites to play the minigames that they had. Ones I remember specifically have to be that Dora Carnival game, the Backyardigans game, and possibly my favorite one that I feel like still holds up decently well, Wow Wow Wubsy, a very interesting kind of game that felt like somewhere between Mario and Sonic, basically a 2D platformer that I actually played quite recently, finding it on the internet somewhere. I didn't discover YouTube for a very long time, so I never really went on the internet to look at any kind of videos, unlike my younger siblings who have been basically doing that their entire lives. Although I definitely liked playing on my PC for games, it also served as the reason that I never got below a 95% on a spelling test in elementary school. Growing up, my mom always sat down with me to read, and one day, one of my Christmas presents happened to be something called Hooked on Phonics Master Reader. This program was something that you installed on the PC, and it taught you things like reading comprehension, grammar, and spelling. If you were to sit a book in front of me when I was in the first grade, my ADHD would cause me to doze off all the time, but when it came to doing everything on a computer, for some reason everything just clicked. Yes, 1.5 decades before all of the kids nowadays were doing virtual online learning with a computer due to the pandemic, I was doing it with my mom by choice while also attending in-person school, so I was kind of like doing double school at this point in a way, but it really was a good program because honestly, it taught me a lot, and I have pretty decent writing grammar to this day, and I haven't had any problems in my English classes from that point on. So yeah, I'd say it was probably a good experience and very good start on the computer. After those years of being on a computer, I still had never really played any legitimate games made for the PC until one day when my friends in the 4th grade introduced me to Roblox. I didn't start actively playing that game until the 5th grade, and at that point I was addicted to both that game and Guitar Hero at the same time, and that's how my original YouTube channel Guitar Hero Roblox God got its name. At the time, my brothers and I had to share a computer, so we had this log sheet to put down our time so that we knew whose turn it would be to play next. Obviously, with 3 young kids, that taking turns thing almost never goes well, so by the time I was playing Guitar Hero 3 and Aerosmith on PC where songs would be pretty lengthy, I decided that I wanted to get a laptop for my birthday. That laptop that I ended up getting was a Toshiba satellite laptop with the dual-core i3 and integrated graphics, but for its time, it actually ran pretty well. Anyway, this was my laptop that I used to improve on GH3 PC, and I was progressing much faster than I did when I had to share a computer. So basically I skipped some time from when I was talking about me being in the 4th grade, because I ended up getting this laptop at the end of the 6th grade. So yeah, I kind of skipped from 5th grade to 6th grade without saying it, but anyway. About a year later, at the end of my 7th grade year, many of my friends were jumping into gaming on their laptops and PCs on games other than Roblox, so I decided to make a Steam account and start seeing what my laptop was able to do. As it turned out, it was pretty decent for its time, and it was able to keep up with Xbox 360 titles as long as I kept the graphics on the lower side. I remember playing through a majority of GTA 4 and getting anywhere from 17 to 23 FPS. It played like garbage, but I still had fun. This was only a few months after the launch of the Xbox One and PS4 that I started showing interest in PC gaming, and as my library was growing, it gravitated me towards getting something that would be current gen. The biggest factor for why I wanted something more powerful though was definitely to improve my Guitar Hero 3 frame rate to be able to hit faster and more complex patterns, as funny as it sounds. The 8th grade comes along, and I was definitely interested in converting fully to PC gaming, but I didn't really know anything about PCs at this point. The only thing that I knew is that one of my old Guitar Hero friends had built one a year prior and started improving rapidly, and my other friend Matt was going to be building one for Christmas. Although I had slight interest in the PS4, I knew that my brother was going to be getting it, so I didn't bother getting a console, and I didn't plan on ever doing it either. My first thing that I was looking for was a gaming laptop, and there was a point in time where my dad made a stop at Best Buy while I was looking around at some offerings. As I heard from many people, anything below $800 for a laptop at the time was just not good enough to keep up, and I was looking at this one Asus laptop that looked to have a GTX 750 Ti, if I remember, and one of those older i7 laptop CPUs that I can't remember the name of off the top of my head. I talked to my dad about it, and he basically said hell no, considering that he was never happy with spending above a certain price point for each of us on Christmas. After some talk on the way back home, he asked me if instead of getting a gaming laptop, if I wanted to learn how to build a PC instead. His logic was that he would rather spend the extra money on a PC and have it be a learning experience for me rather than spending quite less on a laptop without me understanding how the thing works. My two friends that I mentioned before, Matt and Chris, picked out parts for me. Chris was the Guitar Hero guy. And the whole thing ended up coming to $1,350. So $1,350, which was definitely higher than what my dad wanted, and somehow my dad and I managed to bring the price down to $1,200, still above what he wanted, but we kind of made that little negotiation doing that. Basically, we went from Corsair Vengeance RAM to Team Elite, which were both 16GB DDR3 1600MHz sets, so I didn't really lose anything from that. And then we also opted for a Zotac model of the GTX 970 rather than the MSI model that I was originally going for. Surprisingly, the last big thing that actually caused a price cut was going from the i7 3770K to the i7 4770K. What I didn't know about at this time was that there was an i7 4790K that was the exact same price as the 4770K, and basically I ended up accidentally going with the 4770K, which didn't really make a difference because I'm going to end up overclocking the thing in the future anyway. In the end, I got the PC for Christmas, and my dad and I worked on building it together. As surprising as it sounds, he had never actually built an actual computer before this, but he was more than qualified to do it since he was literally able to build and design motherboards. I remember being extremely sick that day that I built the thing, but that didn't stop me from installing Guitar Hero 3 and absolutely being blown away from the frame rate being around 1900. As talked about before though, now that my Steam library was growing and I had this beast of a computer, there was nothing stopping it from playing any game. This made me 100% interested in computer hardware, and it also made me interested in multiple kinds of games at this point. The first thing I did was play through the campaign of Advanced Warfare, and then I finished GTA 4 for the first time only a few days later. With all the GTA games completed, with all of GTA 4 completed I should say, all that was left was to wait patiently, or not so patiently as I did, for GTA 5 to release on PC. In terms of waiting for games, this is probably the first game that I was ever excited for that got delayed, and based on that fact, it was really frustrating to see it get delayed around 3 different times. Eventually, the game came out, and I ended up staying home from school to play all the way through the campaign, which I completed in one sitting. As years went on, I bought a ton of consoles and became a collector as well, but my main platform for the third-party games was always on the PC, considering I hated it when a game on console only hit 30 FPS. I'd say I was about in the 10th grade at this point, and this was the year after getting my youngest brother a Wii U, as talked about in my History with Nintendo video. I figured that it was finally time to build him a PC, since the only interest in gaming he seemed to have was on that terrible computer that we used as a family. I knew that PC gaming would be his thing, so I talked it over with my dad, who at first wasn't very interested in the idea. My brother was turning 10, and my dad thought that it would be a little bit weird to be getting him a gaming PC at that young of an age. Because of this, we decided to take that budget-friendly approach rather than going all out like we did on my PC. We ended up going for a choice that would bite our ass for a few years to come, and we went for the AMD FX 8320, GTX 960, and 8GB of DDR3 1600MHz RAM. The graphics card itself was fine, but the CPU was an absolute shit show. I remember when he wanted to play certain CPU-intensive games, and they would run like complete shit. I remember trying to watch him play Ark, and I swear that game was hovering between 17 to 20 FPS. I remember that the guy at Best Buy told us that we should have gone for the i5, but my dad didn't listen. Ironically, we bought him a new motherboard with an i5 about 2 years later. By the way, this is later than my next topic, and I did that build for him myself this time. Skip some time to around 2016, and the 1000 series of NVIDIA cards were announced alongside the RX 400 series of AMD cards. As an NVIDIA guy, I really wanted to opt for the GTX 1080, but my parents weren't going to spend that kind of money since they had already got me the PC, the Xbox One, and the PS4. Eventually, we came to a compromise, and we settled with the GTX 1070, which has to be the greatest choice of a graphics card that I've ever opted for, and I gave my brother my GTX 970 since, he was playing on a 960, and I felt that giving him the 970 would improve his performance. When it launched, people were scalping it quite heavily, but definitely not as bad as things are going now. Immediately, I learned that this graphics card was completely overkill for 1080p at the time, as I was never dropping below 60 FPS on any of the games at the max settings. I decided that the next big thing that I had to do was to get a new monitor with a higher resolution. I didn't jump to 1440p though. I immediately dove into 4K before it was really a big thing that everyone was going for. For Christmas later this year, I got my Asus 4K monitor, and this was only about a year before HDR hit the mainstream. Immediately, my improvement in games were huge, and that included in Doom 2016, a game that I beat as soon as bumping that resolution up after having trouble on my previous 1080p monitor beating the game. Not only was I stunned by how the visuals were at this resolution, but I was completely shocked, and I'm still shocked to this day, that my PC was able to push this far when a GTX 1070 was technically labeled a 1440p card. As time went on, I started building more PCs. My friend Tyler needed it done, and I sat in my room working on it while he was at his house asleep. I remember specifically that there was a Ryzen 3 1300X, 8GB of DDR4 2400MHz RAM, and I gave him my brother's old GTX 960 as a birthday present to add to the build. As stated before, I upgraded my brother's PC as well to that i5 only a few months later, and after this year, my gaming hiatus unfortunately started, and I really just wasn't interested in anything tech or video game related anymore. But about 2 years into the hiatus, my friends Matt and Tyler called me up, and they basically told me that Tyler just got himself a near $2,000 PC, and they asked me if I wanted to come over and help him build it. It turned out that Tyler somehow made his old PC run slow that I had just built him like 2 years prior, and he was looking to get something on the high end. He got an i9 9900K, 16GB of DDR4 3600MHz RAM, and an RTX 2070. I remember going over there and helping Matt build the thing, and it made me realize that the new technology norm that I had missed during my time of not paying any attention to the industry. Paying, sorry about that, guys. I was complete shock that he was using an SSD as a game drive and an M.2 SSD for his OS, and it made me realize that this was the way that gaming was going to progress, which is pretty funny because this was about a year before the Series X and PS5 were going to feature SSDs, and before we even knew they were going to feature SSDs. So we got it up and running, and this was one of the biggest reasons that I have to say that my interest in gaming came back, and specifically in tech itself. The last story that I'm going to bring up has to do with my younger brother again, and this time it was our third time upgrading his PC. Basically, he just had really bad luck with PCs for whatever reason. Whenever we built him, somewhere down the line, something would just pose as a problem. This time, this motherboard for some reason wouldn't accept dual channel RAM, and the reason was because of a faulty CPU according to Best Buy, which we figured out years later. The only solution to improving the performance at this point was to get him a single channel 16GB RAM stick to upgrade from his 8GB of single channel RAM, and that was what we were going to do for the holiday, which was holiday of 2020, as I assumed. But I assumed wrong, and my dad caught me completely off guard with this choice. One day, he came into my room and was talking about my brother's PC and how he was confused on how it was running so bad. My brother at this point was a year older than I was when I first built my PC, so my dad figured that it was finally time to teach him how to build one too. After all of these years of going budget on my brother's computer, we finally decided to go towards the high end when going for his next PC. Unfortunately, during the time of us wanting to build his PC, parts were out of stock everywhere or insanely high priced, which forced my dad to spend much more than he did when he built my PC. I believe it was like $1,500, and we didn't even buy a graphics card. Originally, we had ordered a Ryzen 9 5900X, 32GB of DDR4 3600MHz RAM, and we couldn't secure a graphics card, so I was going to give him my GTX 1070 and take my 970 back from his other computer. I figured that since I already had the Series X and PS5 at this point because I bought the two next-gen consoles, it was only fair that my brother got the best PC experience instead of me having basically everything better than him, and which I had for all the years. I had all the next-gen consoles, I had a Switch, Xbox One, PS4, and I had a more powerful PC, so it was only fair that he finally got that chance to have the best PC in the house, considering it was really his only platform and the only platform he plays now. Christmas comes along, and he was surprised as hell to see that we got him a whole new PC rather than just RAM. There was a problem though, and that was that the Ryzen 9 was just still not coming in. We contacted the distributor multiple times, and they just kept giving us dates further and further. Eventually, a Ryzen 7 5800X came in stock about 2 hours away from where we lived, and since my brother is a gamer and doesn't really do anything else on his PC in terms of content creation, he wouldn't notice a single difference with that downgrade, so he was basically fine with it when we told him we were going to get the Ryzen 7 instead. I can probably even say that he would have been perfectly fine if we gave him like a Ryzen 5 3600, but I guarantee he would have noticed absolutely no difference if we gave him a Ryzen 5 5600X. But I wanted to see this thing be as high-end as possible because I really wanted to see him get the same kind of experience that I did when I first built my computer. So my dad drove the distance, even though I told him I would do it myself. And finally, my brother and I sat down and built the PC. I did most of the work, but he did some of the work as well. He was very nervous. He's always been nervous with breaking things, even though he is miles smarter than I am in basically every field. So yeah, we built the PC, and it is still running beautifully today. I'm glad to say that he's using it. So this brings us to the present. My brother's having the time of his life on that new PC, and the GTX 1070 is still punching hard in his PC. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to find him a graphics card, and I'm not entirely sure when we will finally get one. My prediction is that by the time cards are more available, it will be worth waiting for the 4000 series of nvidia cards at this point, since I have a feeling they'll be a year away, or whatever AMD has to offer in that regard as well. I'm perfectly happy with my GTX 970 as well, which turns out to be able to push above expectations. I can't really say that PC is my main platform anymore, as I've pretty much converted into a full-blown collector, as well as the PC not being as powerful as my two consoles at the moment, but I'm still using my same exact PC that I got all those years back, with the only difference being an addition of an SSD and an extra 16 gigs of RAM to make 32. Who knows what the future holds in this regard, but despite mainly playing console now, I don't ever see myself drifting away from PCs, as I'm studying to be a game dev, and once I do have my job, I will probably be going to the extreme high end of PCs for not only gaming, but game development on my own. As of now, I recently got a new laptop for only $600 that has a GTX 1650 and Ryzen 5 4600H, and next year I should be getting a laptop from Full Sail University that blows my current one away. Thank you guys for watching this video if you made it this far. I am still a diehard PC gamer today, regardless of being a collector. I still build my Steam library and everything, and I still get games for my PC all the time. But, you know, I'm a person that plays every platform, and console is just currently my main one at the moment. So thank you guys for watching this video. I will see you all in the next one.